Your heart is the light of this world. Don't cover it with your mind. A quote by Muji. Key number 1, tend your inner garden. Since you're listening to this book, I imagine you've had experiences with meaningful coincidences, or what Carl Jung referred to as synchronicity. Maybe you've asked yourself, what is synchronicity about, and why is it happening? You might have wondered, how do I follow these mysterious signs and symbols? Why would I? And where are they leading me? Or perhaps you're just in awe of the magic of synchronistic events and want more of it. If this is you, I'd say you're on the precipice of unlocking a new soul assignment. While you may not know your soul assignment or your life purpose, your spirit does, and it's actively trying to guide you onto your unique soul-led path. Synchronicity, the occurrence of remarkable coincidences that show up in your life, is your spirit's way of ensuring you get the message, though the signs and symbols are not always clear or easy to interpret. As synchronicity becomes undeniably evident in your life, you may feel overwhelmed, slightly paranoid, or on the edge of going crazy. Suddenly, you are faced with circumstances that challenge your ideas about reality, arising through a string of events and chance encounters as if it's a dream, all despite the fact that you're fully awake and moving about through your day. Synchronicity has been a part of my internal compass since early childhood. Having experienced a number of challenging situations where I was too young and unable to think my way through my life decisions, it became my cosmic guidepost. It happened as a result of survival. I simply got clear about what I wanted, prayed for guidance, and then followed synchronicity's unpredictable trail. This allowed me to successfully navigate an enormous number of difficulties and take advantage of golden opportunities. Time and again, synchronicity brought me into direct contact with people who shared critical gifts and messages at key points that shaped my life and directed my career. By following synchronicity's breadcrumbs, I've been led to personal mentors, mystics, yogis, shamans, and leading business figures. I've been led to significant relationships and partnerships, each of which would appear as inexplicable as the next when viewed from the conventional, rational perspective. Learning to tune into the signs and symbols of synchronistic events led me to launch businesses in high-tech, music distribution, and organic farming. It led me to build sustainable communities and lead retreats for conscious evolution. The synchronistic guidance I've received has never been rational. It directed me to pick up my roots and move abroad for a year to England and then to the Holy Land for 6 months. I'm not Jewish, so that made no sense, but I met a man there who changed my life. Synchronistic events led me to work and reside in Tokyo, Kyoto, and Mount Fuji for several years, opening magical doorways at every turn. It then directed me for 8 long and magical years to settle in and amongst the sacred sites of southern India. It later directed me to return to my homeland and the ancient redwood forests of northern California. Synchronicity led me to live on Mount Shasta, one of the most intensely energetic places on the planet, and then for 5 years in the Mayan Riviera. None of these journeys and moves made sense to me at the time, but I felt divinely guided, and the experiences were mind-blowing and deeply rewarding. When I pay attention to synchronicity, it generally increases in frequency and at an accelerating rate. When I've chosen to ignore them, they don't go away. They inevitably become louder and more forceful. In my experience, the more I revered my intuition, the more magical and generous my life became. And here's the great news. The more I've worked to fine-tune my intuition, in part by learning to interpret and follow synchronicity's quiet whispers before they became grunts, screams, or yells, the more I found clarity about my life's purpose and began to radiate deep-seated confidence, joy, and compassion from within. Whenever I resisted my intuition, life became exceedingly difficult and even painful, as Spirit often found other ways to guide me to change. It can be hard to process all the information that enters our senses when we embrace the magic of the universe. In fact, if you were raised in a modern society that promotes rationality above all other values, except perhaps irrational consumerism, you have likely muted or shut off your connection to your primal nature altogether in order to fit into the mainstream culture, to keep a job, and to hold everything together. This leaves people feeling disconnected from their true nature and stretched between two opposing polarities, inner and outer realities. In order to surmount the challenges we face, humanity's ability to love and connect with our own true nature and each other must become a priority, and quickly, before we self-destruct. The epidemic of self-destruction is evident in the bombing and poisoning of our planet. But what is less evident is that these external manifestations are an inherent product of our deeper psyches. We prefer to rally against issues outside of us rather than face our own inner demons. It's time we stop blaming others for the suffering, pain, and loss in our lives and instead learn to tend our inner gardens and manage the internal war zone in our minds and bodies. To experience a lasting sense of beauty, serenity, and love, we must start within. Through our advancements in science, technology, and metaphysics, we are learning of the deep, essential interconnectedness of our hearts and minds. For so long, we've been trained to put ourselves into little boxes in order to fulfill the requirements of our education, our faith-based affiliations, our family status, and our work in the world. But now that our economy, based on a capitalist, consumer-oriented lifestyle, is shattering, many of us find ourselves disconnected and in pain from its destruction. If you're scrambling to keep it all together, or similarly, other aspects of your life are in disruption and turmoil, perhaps you'll discover that those little boxes didn't fit you in the first place, and the old pieces are not meant to come back together. There's another way beyond the boxes, and we need to awaken our deeper connection to our own soul in order to discover it. There is something new emerging. Take a moment and look around. We are dealing with a society made sick by its own mind. Anxiety, fear, depression, obesity, grief, eating disorders, bipolar tendencies, mental instability, and the loss of vitality and purpose have become the new normal. Taking pharmaceutical drugs for these mental and emotional disorders has become our culture's baseline. A report from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, states that antidepressants were the third most common prescription drug taken by Americans of all ages from 2005 to 2008, and the most frequently used by persons aged 18 to 44 years old. It's as if we're tortured by our efforts to try and fit into a society that does not acknowledge or respect our multidimensional nature and our human needs. We're dealing with a crisis of purpose. Beyond capitalism, corrupt politics, and corporatization of our society, pharmaceutical agendas, and global fear tactics, there's a new era that is very real, and it's already here. When you learn to open yourself to the deep, multidimensional nature of reality, you will realize you also exist in a magical world where joy, love, and peace are abundant. My hope is that by hearing this book and practicing my synchronicity method, you will meet me in that magical world and perhaps even join me on my journey to create collaborative leadership councils based on love, joy, connection, and compassion, all brought together synchronistically. Each one of us has a glitch within our psyche that needs our attention, a faulty program that was put there either from family inheritance, societal programming, or the false beliefs we chose to adopt. It's imperative that we tend our mental garden and take note of the toxic thoughts that contaminate our minds and emotions. The things you judge or have strong feelings about are big clues to the areas of your mind that you need to explore and tend to. Taking time to write down the incessant thoughts, judgments, and limiting beliefs you have about yourself or others will help you uproot them. These thoughts hide in idle moments, like when you look in the mirror, when you're waiting for someone, before bed or just after rising, when you're driving alone, or when you're working out. What are your thought forms saying? Are they creating fertile soil or poisoning you? The good news is that your thoughts are not true. They are not even yours. Most likely, they are ideas you picked up from others. They work much like a virus being passed around unnoticed. By becoming aware of your thoughts, you can begin to dispel the ones that cause you pain and discomfort and choose other thoughts that are more positive and loving. Good thoughts will give you energy rather than consume it. It's imperative to take inventory and stop the madness. Unlock your creative genius. From my experience with past life memory and the thousands of verified cases I learned about while working with past life regression experts in India, I've concluded that we have soul contracts and agreements made before birth. These contracts suggest that as souls, we choose the specific circumstances of our lives, including our family challenges and life experiences, in order to learn, grow, and fulfill our life purpose. There is a source code within your DNA planted by a divine hand. Your source code, which I refer to as your codex, contains your creative genius. It has the potential for wondrous love and self-expression that your mind can hardly fathom. Your DNA has encoded within it the memory of your immortal nature and contains within it the blueprint to express your fullest potential. Before your birth, you lived among the stars, and as a spirit understood your true nature. Then you descended here by choice to be animated in human form at this particular moment in time. Your human birth was not a random occurrence. The day, time, and place of your birth, as well as the family to which you were born, were all selected to make up a set of challenges and teachings you must acquire to live out your destiny. Your codex lives in your DNA like a seed planted within your biology. When your codex is nurtured and cared for, you grow in its image. Your thoughts about your life are the soil in which it grows. Your emotions, desires, relationships, and actions provide nutrients for your potential to unlock, or they add toxins to keep you shut down. As with any seed, you can't determine how big and strong the plant will become just by looking at it. How you tend your inner garden, your unconscious and conscious thoughts, is what allows your codex to unlock, restructure from within, and grow strong and efficient, or what causes it to stay dormant, glitch out, or become overridden with malware. The key to unlocking your codex and activating your true potential lies within your heart's deepest desires. Just like with all seeds, your codex needs to break open in order to sprout and take root. This breaking open is the hard part. It needs to break through the old structure. But once the codex is unlocked, it's no longer bound and it can quickly begin to evolve. While for some, this breaking open of their codex is joyous, for most, it's a painful yet miraculous experience. By following my synchronicity method and lovingly tending your inner garden now, when your codex begins to crack open, you will be ready and have healthy, fertile soil for its stabilization. Something to note is that this is not a one-and-done experience. The codex within us is evolutionary, and like all biology, it continues to learn and grow. With each new level, there will be a recalibration period. During these times of recalibration, you will need to integrate and stabilize. Your codex does not contain the programming of the wishes and dreams your parents had for you. It contains nothing your culture, society, or heritage has told you to become. Your codex has a mysterious and magical biological unfolding that, if cared for in the right way, will grow into a beautiful, resilient, and powerful creative force, unique to you and you alone. The innate nature of your codex will lead you to liberation and the deepest love imaginable. As your codex unlocks and grows and strengthens in its knowledge of self, you will eventually come to recognize that you are blooming among the fields of a new era, a multi-dimensional place where all those who have awakened to their true nature meet. My synchronicity method will unlock your codex to grow and stabilize in the here and now, exactly as your biology is designed to do. It will unleash your sovereign nature, the living and breathing innate genius that has its own expression, set of rules, and clear responsibilities. Establish your flow state. When you activate your codex through my synchronicity method, you will come to see that our lives are guided by an intelligent superhighway. It feels like liquid light, moving within and around us, flowing from person to person and event to event. This phenomenon is what physicists often refer to as string theory. String theory is a theoretical framework in physics that attempts to describe the fundamental building blocks of the universe. It proposes that instead of tiny particles like electrons or quarks, the fundamental constituents of reality are extremely tiny, vibrating strings. These strings can vibrate in different modes, producing different particles and forces in the universe. In string theory, particles and forces are not separate entities, but rather different vibrations of the same underlying strings. The theory suggests that everything from particles of matter to the forces that govern them arise from the vibrations of these tiny strings. One of the intriguing aspects of string theory is that it requires more than the usual 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time to be consistent. It suggests the existence of additional hidden dimensions that are compacted or curled up so small that they're not directly observable in our everyday experience. String theory is still a work in progress and has yet to make definitive experimental predictions that can be tested. However, it offers a nice framework for understanding quantum mechanics and how synchronicity works while providing a unified description of the fundamental forces and particles in the universe. When the amount of synchronicity in your life increases, you will feel carried, supported, and guided by some sort of cosmic intelligence, an unseen hand orchestrating beyond your mind's capacity. When synchronicity is dormant, you may feel that your life has become stagnant or mundane and lacks purpose. You can practice my synchronicity method for a deep, integrative recalibration to attune to your natural flow state. When you begin to flow with the natural rhythms of your life, you will find yourself carried by this intelligent superhighway toward a beautiful destination. This feeling of living in sync, being in the flow of life's magic, is what connects us to our innate creative genius and awakens our codex. As you learn to navigate even the fastest of synchronistic hyperconnectivity, you will learn to recognize yourself as the true creator of your reality, and you will no longer be enslaved behind painful illusions of self-limitations. Are you ready to learn my synchronicity method and join me on this mystical and extraordinary journey? In the pages that follow, I will share with you how to access the liquid superhighway, awaken your codex, and align with your unique creative genius. Discover the golden thread. As we accept our innate nature and release our toxic, self-limiting programs, we begin to weave a golden thread that reconnects us to our humanity and awakens our dormant human potential. As you learn to flow gracefully with synchronicity, you awaken to the invisible threads of this golden latticework and anchor the evolution of mankind on the planet. There's a frequency of divine grace and unconditional love within the liquid superhighway that opens you to honoring your ideals. By attuning to this loving frequency, you are reweaving this golden matrix of light and allowing your codex to unlock and show you the magical stardust that you're made of. As you awaken this dormant potential, a new formation of light extends into the invisible space between you and others. This latticework formation is the evolution of our collective consciousness, and it ripples out across the planet in ways that our minds can't fully comprehend. When you're in the flow of synchronicity, feelings of trust, faith, surrender, love, and creativity abound. You are taking the path of least resistance, moving with the flow, and the liquid superhighway of pure biological intelligence carries you. By practicing my synchronicity method and doing the exercises in this book, you will be able to unlock your codes, activate your potential codes, and allow synchronicity to expand your life and sense of purpose in it. There's a higher order to the way things work, one that's evident in the harmony of the natural world. Similarly, when you tune into your life's rhythms, cycles, and seasons, a higher order of consciousness begins to awaken from within. You discover a knowing that arises from deep within, and you become able to navigate life with better clarity and focus. In addition, you will learn to surrender and release the need to control your life. In awakening to this deep knowing, you discover a deeper purpose for your life, beyond anything you studied in school or were taught by your family. As you will soon see, my synchronicity method is very easy and does not require much effort, though I suggest daily practice. What is required most of all is a sincere heart and a dedication to your own personal growth. Are you ready to begin? Discipline your life. Synchronicity flows like a liquid wave of information. As such, there's a rhythm to it, a push and a pull, a negative and a positive. Just like you can be carried by ocean tides moving in and out, you can ride a wave of synchronicity to flow faster towards unlocking your codex. Sometimes, synchronicities whisper softly and gracefully to open doors and move you in a different direction. At other times, they hit you with a hearty slap on the face. I call these course corrections, or in the worst of circumstances, total wipeouts. These can be a short and quick slap that just stings your cheeks a little, or a full-blown knockout punch that leaves you down for the count and in agony. In either case, the course corrections or wipeouts happen to get you back on the wave and in the flow. On such occasions, it's important to take time to check in with yourself and to release your resistance and your need to be in control. Or else, you may soon repeat the experience. Like it or not, your life will course correct to get you back in line with your evolutionary nature. When you're in deep resistance, ignoring the pain that's present in your life, or pushing yourself too hard, you will face an inevitable course correction. Why do we spend so much energy resisting our human nature? We get conditioned to ways of being that we've actually outgrown or that are no longer good for us. Perhaps we're just doing what other people are doing, what's considered normal, or what we think our friends and family expect of us. Most often, it's hidden pain that keeps us trapped in our old toxic patterns. Eventually, we find that these toxic patterns are not in line with our true nature and pure joy. In July of 2015, the house I was living in with 5 others suddenly burned to the ground. Overnight, I lost my home, personal belongings, and office. Perhaps, worst of all, I lost my computer, with all the years of writing and business plans, including my backups. In the morning, standing beside the smoldering ruins, all I had were the pajamas on my back and the shoes and jacket I had hastily grabbed on the way out the door. Thankfully, no one was hurt in the fire. All 6 of us made it out just in time. There was no known cause for the fire, and unfortunately, I had let my renter's insurance lapse. But that's not the whole story. With every darkness that has fallen upon my life, there has come a light. There is always a balance between the negative and the positive, the push and the pull. It's simply the natural order of life. So I had faith that things were going to be okay. Indeed, while I lost everything, the fire was nothing less than my wishes and dreams coming true. Let me explain. A mere 2 days before the fire, I hosted a closing ceremony in my home with the recent students in a 6-week course I was leading called Blisscipline, where I taught many of the principles outlined in this book. This was our last gathering, so we finished the session with strong intentions and a ceremony. When it came time for me to say my intentions moving forward, I chose to let go of stress and overwork, and I called in sustainable new structures for growth. The day after the course ended, I felt depleted. I needed a vacation like nobody's business. Ironic, given what I was teaching, I know. It had been exactly a year to the month since I had been living in the Lake House Temple, a community house in Oakland, California. During that time, I had never taken more than a few days off to relax. However, just 1 year prior, I had been living in South India and happily referred to myself as a lady of leisure. I did whatever aligned with my flow and allowed bliss to be my guide. But now, suddenly back in the Bay Area, in one of the most expensive cities in the world, I was eager to build my foundation and had fallen back into my old ambitious ways of pushing myself. I was eager to remind myself of my own Blisscipline practice I had discovered and shared with others. In the process, my ambition was overriding my innate wisdom, and no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't get above the hustle or back to my natural flow state. The day after I completed that course with my students, I drove to my mom's house. She lived on the coast in a small beach town just south of San Francisco. Exhausted from the toxic cycle I was in, I spent the entire 1-hour drive crying, wondering how I had fallen into this old behavior pattern I thought I'd overcome years prior. Before arriving at my mom's, I sat on the beach for a few hours to release my emotions, pull myself together, and pray for guidance. The madness I had brought upon myself needed to stop. By the time I got to my mom's house, I was even more exhausted, depleted, and desperate for change. My brother generously offered to take my mom and me out for a nice dinner. It was lovely to relax and just enjoy the moment with them. I became acutely aware of how disconnected I had become from my natural state by being in an insane hustle to make my life happen and fit into my new city surroundings. Pouring out my heart to my family over dinner, I shared with them how I couldn't live any longer with this lifestyle I had gotten myself into. I felt like I was killing myself trying to keep up with my monthly rent. And for what? To live in the city? I sensed that something had to change soon, but I had no idea how to change it. I wasn't ready to move back to India, and I had no idea where else to go. After spending the night at my mom's, I felt a bit rejuvenated. Arriving back at my house late Monday afternoon, I started preparing for another week of Oakland living. My new housemate, Raphael, and I had a short chat that afternoon in passing. We both remarked on how our lives had been guided by a mysterious force that kept presenting us with so many challenges to overcome in order to build resilience. As we shared our war stories of synchronistic course corrections, we had a good laugh and felt relieved to find someone else understand the nature of our reality. I shared with her how I lost my father and another man who was my spiritual father and mentor in July of 2003, just 2 weeks apart from one another. I also shared with her another story where in July of 2009, I had been robbed of the inheritance my father had left me. And in the midst of cleaning up the disaster the robbers left in my house, I had found a photo of my father I had taken of him just a few days before he died. How that photo ended up on the floor underneath a pile of clothes was confusing, as I kept that photo neatly tucked away inside a diary that was nowhere close to the place of the theft. It was at that moment when I found his photo that I realized the date of the robbery was the same as his passing 6 years prior. July had somehow become a monumental month of trauma triggers for me. She, in turn, shared her significant life transitions and synchronistic patterns. It was a deep conversation that moved us both to a place of awe and surrender to our life story, despite our big challenges. Trying to go to sleep that night, I was relentlessly uncomfortable. I loved my house aesthetically and logistically, but for some reason, I became fixated on everything I didn't like about it. My room wasn't dark enough, and my nervous system couldn't relax. I needed more personal space. I wanted more trees and a vegetable garden. I felt anxious and scared that my life force was shriveling up inside. With rents on the rise, I didn't feel like I could move out, and I didn't know how to make a real change given my financial circumstances at that time. I thought I needed to stick it out another year to get things back on track. Push through it, I thought to myself. That's what people do in the city, right? Perhaps things would be better if I changed the furniture in my room. Maybe that would give me a fresh perspective. I was trying to be resourceful and creative. Sitting on my bed, tossing and turning in discomfort, I pulled out my phone and started to surf Craigslist for new furniture. Just as I was sending an email request to make a bid for a beautiful new bed, I heard an explosion outside. I instantly jumped to my feet and instinctually threw my phone on the bed, because it was not normal to hear gunshots or fireworks in our neighborhood. The rational part of me wanted to ignore it and just go back to bed, but I couldn't. I needed to see if everyone was okay. I called out to Raphael, thinking maybe her big bookshelf had fallen over. She came out of her room, rubbing her eyes, not sure what was happening. I looked out of the top floor window, and that's when I saw fire bursting out of the windows on the first floor. Everyone else was still asleep. I went into first responder mode. I ran around the house screaming, "The house is on fire! Get out now!" One by one, they came out of their rooms, groggy-eyed and barely able to respond. I was running up and down the stairs, trying to figure out who had misplaced the fire extinguisher, but the fire was too big and the flames had already filled the first floor. Luckily, we all got out just in time. Within 10 minutes, the flames were through the roof and the building had been consumed. Raphael and I stared at each other outside as we watched the house burn. Really? We just talked about this earlier today. We looked at each other in total amazement and wondered again at the significance of these types of major course corrections. Raphael had lived in the house for just 2 days. Even more incredibly, just 2 years prior to that, she had lost everything in a house fire. At least this time, she had insurance. It all seemed entirely familiar, yet all too tragic. The moment of grace had yet to come. As I looked down at my t-shirt, I was instantly full of wonder, amazement, and bliss, and I began laughing out loud. Everything started to make sense at that moment, and I knew I was being set free. A euphoric feeling of ecstasy overcame me. It seemed so strange, given what was happening, and it reminded me of the feeling I had when I watched my dad leave his body. I was sad about his leaving, but the magic of seeing his soul depart was such a transcendental experience that I felt ecstatic rather than grief. It was confusing to my mind. Just before going to bed, I felt an urge to wear a new t-shirt I had bought just a few weeks before at a 4th of July festival my friend Corey creates each year called World One. As a former head of a future fashion magazine and an ex-fashion photographer, I am neither a person who ordinarily wears t-shirts, nor am I someone who's ever been inspired to buy clothes at a festival. In fact, I avoid shopping as much as possible, so the purchase itself was unusual. But the painting on this t-shirt had spoken to me from across the crowded outdoor music event, and I made a beeline toward it. It was the creation of a local artist and consisted of many block prints layered one upon another, so I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I instantly picked it up and bought it without trying it on or even a second guess. My soul sister, Amanda, who was with me and knows my style well, asked, "Really? Are you seriously going to wear that?" I had no idea why I liked the image on that shirt so much, but I could not stop staring at it. It was a red house with wings. The day before at my mom's house, I had taken that shirt along. I had never even tried on the shirt, but for some unexplainable reason, I hand-washed it and then ironed it. Who irons t-shirts? It was a first for me. There was really no rhyme or reason for what I was doing. And by the way, I didn't iron anything else. It felt as if a force of nature was doing all of it through me. Intellectually, I felt calm while washing and ironing and thought of it as meditative therapy. Back home the next day on the night of the fire, I took out that freshly washed and ironed t-shirt and tried it on for the first time just before going to bed. I looked in the mirror and started laughing. I felt ridiculous. Why had I bought this t-shirt? It was not comfortable at all, especially to sleep in, and I just knew I would never wear it outside. A few hours later, there I was standing outside in that crazy t-shirt and watching my house burn and realizing this was now the only shirt I owned. I started laughing out loud at the embarrassment and thought of it being my only item of clothing left. This cosmic joke made me look down at the shirt, trying to come to terms with it being the only item I had salvaged. That's when I realized the house painted on it looked eerily like an illustration of my own house, which was burning before my eyes. The red paint looked like it was on fire, and the wings were carrying the house away. I've included a photo of the shirt so you can see what I'm describing. Behind the house is a green block print image of Mother Mary on a throne with the baby Jesus on her lap, both of their crowns illuminated. On the back of the shirt are a lot of blue dogs, and on top of that, a skeleton dog reading a book with the moon above his head. The words "dog-eared books" are printed under each dog. Each of the illustrations, symbols, and colors on the shirt instantly had meaning to my soul. They began speaking to me at a level my mind could not totally comprehend. At that moment, I knew the entire drama was all part of a great design. I felt freed. I cried with joy and knew I was being completely guided and held through another extreme experience. Before the fire, I was unwilling to make changes and felt unable to slow down, and even though I knew I needed to, the house fire was a massive course correction and an act of divine grace. That shirt I purchased on a whim finally made sense. It was time to let go once again and allow this information superhighway to carry me to my next destination and to trust that there's a higher purpose beyond my mental capacity to know. A serious course correction had been made, and I was listening. A few months after the fire, I moved to a cabin in a pristine setting amongst ancient redwoods, an hour away from the nearest grocery store or gas station. It was a paradise for me and provided the deep restructuring of my life that I craved. In the next chapter, I'll share how synchronicity guided me there.